afternoon, good evening. It's more afternoon now. It's a little sunnier than it was, since we're past we're getting past the winter solstice. So, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the CS Podcast brought to you by the Narrative Justice. Before we get started, as always, we give love, honor, and respect to Leroy Powell. Anyone who doesn't know or did not know, Leroy was 15 years old in 2014. He was a witness to an attempted murder turned infanticide. And he did the right thing, right? Like he gave his witness statement, and his 11-year-old self next to his mother on the night of the preliminary hearing, the video that was played of him giving witness statement was played on the 11 o'clock news by our local news media, completely exposed. Now, this is a child, right? A minor. Both him and his mother completely exposed. They didn't even try to hide his identity at all. So, of course, that night, both he and his mother, were receiving death threats. And several days later, Leroy was killed. That is a reminder that we should always, always, always hold media accountable especially for the ways that they show up in our communities. Like there's life and death in the power of the tongue. That is absolutely fact. Like that's absolute truth. Narrative is the most powerful tool that we have. And if we continue to allow people who do not love or care for us to wield our narrative and control our narrative, we'll continue to show up on the losing end of it. So definitely keep Leroy always in your hearts and your respect. And also understand that like it's not just Leroy who's been so negatively affected by local media, right? Like that's all of us. It only takes about 25% of the community for change to occur. Don't think that your voice is too small. Don't think that you need everybody on your side. Don't think that you need all right, before I do anything, everybody has to agree with me first. No, no, that's just not how it works. Ask me how I know. If you think something needs to be changed, if you think that something could be better, if you got an idea, like whatever it is, right? Like it could be you and your friend, you and your cousin, you and your sibling, you and your neighbors. Just go on and do it. Consistency is key. So as long as you're consistent and convicted in the things that you believe in, you'll be good. Anyone who might still be or experiencing like hardship, having a hard time paying rent or even utilities, the COVID rent relief program is extended to September 2022. So if you are in Allegheny County and are in need of rent assistance or utility assistance, you can go right online to covidrentrelief.alleghenycounty.us and apply online. It's a pretty simple process for the most part, but it's not simple for everybody, and we recognize that. So there are several drop-in centers around the county. The Wellness Collective is hosting one of the drop-in centers in McKeesport. It's located at 335 Fifth Avenue, McKeesport, PA 15132. We're right next door to probation. So if you see probation, look to the left and we're right there. Don't go into probation. Next door. And you can come in and Ms. Renee or somebody will help you apply, complete your application if you just need access to a computer, a printer, or whatever. Inside of that building, we also have a little free store and a little food pantry. So feel free to drop off items or pick up items. You don't have to register or send, fill in your information. You don't need to do any of that. Just come in and get what you want. The drop-in center is open. Well, our drop-in center at the Wellness Collective is open Monday through Friday. On most days, it's 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. On Thursdays, it's 12 noon to 8 p.m. So don't call me. Don't call us. Don't call Action talking about, well, where are they at 10:30 in the morning on Thursday? We ain't there. We will talk to you at 12 p.m. on Thursdays and then to 8 p.m. Every other day is 10 to 6. What else? Self-care housekeeping is hiring wellness providers. The rate is $21 to $30 an hour, depending on the service that's being provided. We work in home. Y'all know I do a lot of things, but we work in home, providing care to lessen stress and other factors. We understand it's head, heart, home. So if I'm struggling internally, if I'm overwhelmed or whatever else, it has a tendency to reflect in the home, and that's true for quite a bit of us, like most of us, if not all of us. So our home wellness providers are there to help mitigate some of that stress in home. So if you're interested in doing that type of work, if you're a compassionate person, please do check us out. You can email us at peacelives@selfcarehousekeeping.com to get more information or to start the application process. I think that's enough of my running my mouth, rambling, whatever I'm doing right now, because I do want to get to the topic at hand. Now, in Pittsburgh, of course, we don't hear too much, or maybe it might just be me, but I feel like we don't have conversations around reparations very often. Shout out to Khalid Rahim. That is the one person that I know to go to who, first of all, knows the history of it, it actively engages in it. We were hoping to get Khalid on the show today as well, but timing didn't work out. So hopefully we'll bring Khalid back later down the line. But other than Khalid, he's the only person that I know of personally that speaks openly and consistently about reparations in the city. The young man that I have today is, like, in my opinion, leading the charge in a lot of ways about the current reparations movement. You might have seen in different states and cities that there are, different reparation bills that are either presented or passed. I know in Detroit, they just passed a reparations bill, which is pretty cool. Has not happened yet in Pittsburgh, but we do have a new Black mayor. But anyway, but speaking, in a general sense, on a national sense, we are going to be here with Mr. Kash Gaines, who's going to, first of all, tell us what 40 acres and a Tesla means, and just talk about this current reparations movement. So I'd like to welcome Kash. What's going on, man?
What up, what up? Thanks for having me.
Most definitely. Thank you for taking the time out and, speaking to the folks about what you know. So my first question is, where are you from?
Yeah, again, thanks for having me. So I was born in Chicago to two Black American parents, one who's from Cabrini Green, the other, my mother, who was from Ohio, I believe, originally. I've fallen out of contact with the both of them, to be honest. When I was young, my dad joined the Navy, so I moved to California. And so, like, at 3 years old, I consider myself a Californian from then on. Middle school, high school, I lived in a city called Alameda, which is like just outside of Oakland in the Bay Area. It was a major naval base at the time. And from there, I moved to Southern California, lived there for about 4 or 5 years. And then after divorce, I lived with my mother in Texas, in North Dallas, a city called Louisville. That was about 5 years where I got into sports and into breakdance, breaking as we call it. And then I went back to live with my father in California, where I started going to college and graduated high school. And now I live here in New York, Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, for the last about 8 years, because I started a YouTube channel filming street dance. Street dance is a universal language, so it's something that people appreciate all over the world. And so I was flown quite often to dance competitions to film with my own camera, edit with my own laptops to post on my own YouTube channel to promote these competitions and the dancers and the DJs. So yeah, that's where I've been for the last 9. Yeah, it's been 10 years, I think, since 2011. I've been here. Yeah, it's 2022. So I'm from all 4 corners. See you like that.
Wow, that's impressive. And also, you're the first guest I've had that is not from Pittsburgh. Like, I mean, sometimes we'll have folks that, like, they were with someone who is from Pittsburgh or whatever, but, like, you're the first person that, like, actively sought out that was not from Pittsburgh, because it's a very Pittsburgh centric podcast. So shout out to you. Word. So that's pretty impressive. Can you tell me, like, what got you interested in the reparations movement? Like, where'd that come about for you?
Definitely. Like, I've always had a certain affinity for our people. I was always appreciative of the things we've contributed to humanity. I often consider myself a humanitarian. And if you look back through the catalog of work I've done as far as filmmaking on the YouTube channel called Yak Films, YAK Films, you'll see that it was predominantly melanated peoples doing their own individual creative freestyle dance styles instead of necessarily, like, the most popular ones at the time. It's not just the Dougie or TikTok dancing like we have now. It was entire freestyles of people with creative moves that they've made up themselves. But as I was traveling the world, for example, in Holland, having conversations with people, it was a double mind, because they were appreciating Black American culture, listening to our music, doing our dance styles, and competing in it to win money and stuff, going to parties about it, dressing as us. But on the same side, they were calling themselves Black. And I got confused, because there was sometimes where I had an opportunity to learn about their unique lineage. Like, for example, back to Holland, a friend of mine who said, yeah, I mean, ultimately, white people see me as Black. And I was like, damn, son, like, we care more about how white people see us than what we would want to represent ourselves as. And I was like, but where are you, like, from? We got to try his food and everything. He said Suriname. And it was one of the first times I'd actually heard that word before. And so from that moment, I started being like, I don't think people should call themselves Black if they know where they're from. I think it's an opportunity for them to represent what white folks were trying to hide as far as the name of their people and the history that ties with that. So that was kind of like the first awakening for me. I went from being a humanitarian to being pan-melanated, to being pan-African, to eventually being Black nationalist, which is, in my opinion, just caring about Black Americans specifically in order to fix our two broken legs before we look to help the entire diaspora and really to help the planet. One other thing is, I thought that we as Black Americans had received a lot of help from the government in order to amend what had happened to us. I thought affirmative action was a good example of progress, right? Although it was 100 years after slavery ended, right? Along with the right to vote. But affirmative action in my studies recently showed me that the biggest opponents are white women, but also the biggest receivers. And I was like, how is that possible if that was something meant for slave descendants or for people who couldn't read and write, their tongues cut out, right? And then I looked further into it and they're like, oh, it's all about intersectionality politics and anti-discrimination being at the forefront and all people being lifted up at once off the specific trauma that Black Americans received. And so I started questioning, what else did they say they gave us that actually did nothing for us? And are we still in a destitute position? And so that, and then lastly, the 2053 statistic, when I saw that our wealth was set to be at zero by 2053. And I know the article speaks primarily to us being kept out of the technology fields, STEM, which I like to call STEAM, because I like to include that A in there for arts, the musicians and dancers and theater artists who are part of our culture as a whole. But we've been a part of STEM, I can argue, since we put a man on the moon. But because we are being kept out of those fields and they're bringing people from outside countries into those fields, our wealth is going to be at zero and we'll be cut out of the automation era that's coming for America. So reparations to me is a foregone conclusion, completely necessary, and an element of fighting for our survival at this point. And I hope more people can just understand that before we move on, you know?
Word. A couple of questions. First question is, can you explain what reparations is for the folks in the back?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's the United Nations definition, which is a 5-pronged approach. It's like compensation, guarantees of non-repetition, restitution, rehabilitation, which would be like therapy. And I'm forgetting one, but that's not necessarily how I go for it. I kind of like to start from the ground up in my own mind for based on what oppressions we're still receiving in modern day. And I think poverty is one of the biggest ones. And so direct cash payments is what I like to focus on, as well as land. And so that's where we come to that hashtag we'll mention in a minute, right? But as far as direct cash payments, there's models, there's precedents set of economic disadvantages that have happened to people throughout history. And there are opportunities for us to use those examples in order to create our claim here in America in modern day, although multiplying it by 10, obviously. And so in studying reparations, I saw how Kenyans, there was a specific tribe called the Mau Mob tribe, which were attacked, tortured in a camp that was built by white folks on their land just because they wanted the independence to govern themselves, right? Britain paid specifically that tribe money. I just want to be very clear. And it was only $2,500. And that was one of the first reasons I was willing to move away from the reparations movement. I thought that our claim would be just as insignificant. $2,500 ain't going to do nothing for me. But then I've learned, and let me just fast forward. You know, there's so many other claims to study, Chile and I can't even name all. But when we get to America, when we get to Japan and stuff, and Japanese Americans receiving reparations, and when we look at Oregon, a state that's offering reparations right now with Senate Bill 619, right? They're offering lifetime payments of $123,000, right? And this is tax-free according to the last sentence. I often like to bring this up to Black Americans because we don't have time necessarily to read through the Build Back Better Act, which is hundreds of pages, but Oregon Senate Bill 619 is a single page. So direct cash payments is my quick answer, but there are so many people who always remind me to say, don't forget about our 850 credit score resets for every Black American, right? And even changing the credit system to include rental payments and phone bill payments. Because right now they say it's racist that it doesn't, that we're kept out of the housing market, while at the same time only mortgage payments and certain credit card bills that you have to take out debt for can help you to accrue credit. So Oregon Senate Bill 619, we know that California has AB 3121, and that was a bill to study reparations in California. And that's where I started thinking about how disproportionately homeless we are in California and how reparations should include housing vouchers. But then we found out that Evanston, Illinois, just north of Chicago, they actually are using marijuana tax dollars to pay housing vouchers. But it's not necessarily for slavery. It's actually for redlining, right? From 1919 to 1969, I believe. And so that's $25,000. I'll just say real quick, and unfortunately not enough to even be a down payment in that region. So we do criticize that reparations claim quite often, and only 16 families have received it. But I just mentioned cash payments, housing, credit score resets, a relook at the credit score system, student loan debt cancellation for Black Americans specifically, a relook at affirmative action, access to therapy by Black therapists, to be clear. And then the most important one I think we can get to, which is our land, which we already had asked for at the end of the Civil War, according to our ancestors at the time, and according to the newspaper articles at the time, which we argued 40 acres and a mule, which I've updated to 40 acres and a Tesla, kind of as a conversation piece in modern day, really hashtag 40 acres and a Tesla. So reparations can have many different facets to it. And each one of those should be an opportunity for us to build a new industry for ourselves that we can control in mass, or at least have the power to pass down to our children through generational wealth. Otherwise, it's not a reparative claim, I'd argue.
Word up, word up. Thank you for all of that information. Someone is asking, is there somewhere they can find all of that information in one place? Would you know, or is this just studies throughout,
I often suggest to people the ADOSfoundation.org website, because they have, I think, 12 different bullet points on what reparations could look like. They don't necessarily use my argument about the 40 acres. They've updated it, comparing it to the Homestead Act that white folks received back in the 1860s, around the same time that we were free from slavery. White folks who were here, as well as those that migrated here, got free land up to 160. I think it was 160 to 500 acres, if I'm not mistaken. So they're saying that we need to bolster our land claim for those who want to, I don't want to say revert back to agriculture, maybe make a revolution back to it. They need 160 acres in some places, even to have a horse ranch in some states. So I'm cool with 160 acres and update to the mule. If it's a tractor, John Deere's moving towards electric tractors. If it's not going to be Tesla, at least an electric vehicle. So we're already planning for our children in the future and green energy as well. There's actually a Black-owned car company named Mims Motors, which is in Detroit, Michigan, by the way, Shannon. And it's electric Black-owned car company. They said that their vehicles can go 1,000 miles on a single charge, further than any Tesla that I've seen so far. So that's something to keep in mind. And yeah.
Word up. You said MIMS, M-I-M-S?
Yeah, MIMS Motors, I think official.com. Yeah, they said they talk about wireless charging for their vehicles as well. But let me go back to the ADOS 101. Excuse me, that's their old website. They've moved it to the foundation.org website. I haven't been there in a while, but there was another thing quite interesting. They spoke about cannabis and about 40%. They call it the 40% rule. And if I'm not mistaken, they speak about 40% of all tax dollars from marijuana going towards a trust for Black people for reinvestment into, anyone who wants to start a cannabis business or something like that. I definitely think we should be looking at percentage numbers instead of a direct cash, just set number payments. That way it's something that can exist in perpetuity, that can rise and fall as the profits of some of these tax dollars. And honestly, in the future, corporations rise and fall. In that same vein, I wanted to mention real quick, to anyone who looks up Black billionaires, you'll find the name Robert Smith. For better or for worse, he went on Forbes' YouTube channel, right, and told them that not only does the government owe reparations to Black Americans, not only does states owe reparations to Black Americans in the forms of land, so on and so forth, but specific corporations could not exist without the unpaid wages, without the insurance going into them receiving capital based off of that, sales based off of that. And so he said that he sent out messages to Fortune 500 CEOs saying that They need to set aside 2%, not 1%, double that, nothing crazy, of all of their money to go into a specific bank that would be black owned, in order to go to black owned businesses, since we don't get loans through major banking institutions currently. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Yeah.
Word up, word up. Okay, all right. Really quickly, can you explain what the ADOS Foundation is? Like, I know what ADOS stands for, but it's new language for me, and I'm glad to have it. But I would like to hear it from you, just because I like to hear you talk about stuff.
In my understanding, for the last 3 years, I was watching YouTube videos, and honestly, the way I got pulled in was from the Black Panther film, right? This lady, Yvette Carnell, and an attorney, Antonio Moore, were both doing a joint show where they were reviewing the film, but they kept comparing it to real life. And to me, it was surreal, because like, I felt like Killmonger was a good character. I felt like what he was trying to do was take down the oppression of black peoples globally. And for him to be depicted as a villain was a bit confusing to me. It was juxtaposition. I don't know. It was a weird message being told. And so as they critiqued it, they spoke about our wealth position. They spoke about how much land we don't own. And so I started looking back through other videos that they made, and some of them weren't even about entertainment. They were just speaking to our political position. And it started to give me a political education. It started to make me think more about which politicians are saying what on TV and why. I mean, I watched The Daily Show before that, Trevor Noah, and even before him, Jon Stewart and stuff. But I really didn't know what it is I was arguing for. And at the time, I was even a bit of a Bernie bro. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was like, we all need healthcare. We all need, you know what I'm saying? And so as I listened to them more, and watching their videos, we came up with that. It was them who I kind of heard come up with that terminology, saying, everyone's black, we get that. But specifically, the people who are American and who are descendants of slavery are the ones who would be a part of this reparations claim. Then we started hearing about in Cobra. We started having the conversation about Pan-Africanism, and if it's feasible, if it's justifiable to do reparations for all 90 nations of the diaspora in America, or if it is more conservative, more specific, and can lead to a snowball effect. So as we started to have these conversations, I thought that title was unique and very, very important for showing who is and who isn't going to receive the 40 acres and a Tesla, for example. And again, HR 40 is named after 40 acres and a mule. And so it's a little bit disheartening to hear, and I heard, I was sitting in on Zoom conversations with Cobra and other people, and they were like, look, the majority of reparations is going to go to Black Americans. So why are you worried? And I'm like, I don't know why it would go to anybody, but, I don't know why, those would be separate claims to me. And it muddies waters. It shares a cake from our trauma. And it's almost like trauma appropriation, and so I don't think that that's safe, therapeutic, justified, and or feasible. And so all those things, flowed into the delineation conversation. I even saw things like the AB 105 bill in California, the Upward Mobility Act, which was suggesting that by 2022, any California state board or agency has to have at least one member of an underrepresented community. But that should have just said Black American, because we've been here 400 years, right? And by the way, it's a volunteer position, first of all. But now underrepresented can mean Black, African American, Caribbean, Pacific Islander, Asian. And some of these peoples weren't enslaved now, we're talking about, right? Or you can be self-identifying as gay, or a veteran known as an ex-veteran, or you can be mentally or physically disabled, and that's self-identifying as well. And so a white dude can self-identify as gay and take a position as an underrepresented person in 2022. That's the issue that we have. That's what intersectionality breeds you. And it ends up giving us crumbs of a cake where we should be the ones who are essential to the country functioning. I'll say it as simple as that. Not just for domestic tranquility, but for intellectual property and morality and a lot of other things. So I'll give it space.
Yeah, man. It makes me think, going back to what you had said about affirmative action, right? Like, mainly benefiting white women. That it was set to be, for us, right? Like, for our pain and suffering. And that's not the case at all, right? Like, in what I really, really appreciate about the language around ADOS is because it names us specifically, like as Black Americans. So ADOS, for anyone who doesn't know, stands for American Descendants of Slavery, right? Like, which is not, this globalized idea of Blackness, which is what we're typically up against. A young woman in Pittsburgh, Gabrielle Gray, shout out to her, speaks about this quite often. When thinking about like disenfranchised persons and whatever language that is put in place of Black, like when it comes to policy, like it essentially washes us away, and it very much, and it feels very intentional. And I'd say it's intentional that, like by saying like a disenfranchised person, underrepresented person, et cetera, like the intention is so that we don't get our just due, right? Like, so as you're saying right now about what was it, AB 105, was it? Yeah, like it's doing that very same thing. It's that washing away. But it sounds good, right? Like this idea, like, oh well, it'll mainly go to y'all. So what are you complaining about? History has told us that is absolutely not the case. Like, and quite frankly, like you said, even if it was the case, right? Even if we did get the majority, I want my whole cake. Like I want my whole joint, because no one else has suffered in the unique way that we have suffered, like, and continue to suffer. No one else experiences that. So why the hell would anybody else benefit from it? Like, what? Hello? What's going on? So yeah, anyway, back.
I can speak further to the 40 acres, further to the Tesla, or we can speak further about our wealth position. Because I think a lot of people are like, what do y'all mean Black folks are suffering? We got LeBron James. What do y'all mean? You know what I'm saying? Jaden Smith had a nice 21st birthday party. I seen it on YouTube. You know what I'm saying? That's why I like Antonio Moore, because he was the first person I heard mention the decadent veil, which is essentially, if you believe in white supremacy, if you believe in white terrorism, as we call it anyway, that it has many different arms to it, many different systems to it, right? The criminal justice system, immigration system. You can agree that they have a hand on media, right? And so with media, they first can criminalize us, right? Make us sexy and dangerous, but they can also overrepresent those who are successful in order to make us believe that those are the rule instead of the exceptions to. And so even with LeBron James, with his $135 million salary, he still doesn't have enough money to school all the kids in Ohio. He just got the one, school in Cleveland. And eventually that's got to be paid for by public dollars, tax dollars, in my understanding. And if it's a poor city, a poor region, it's going to be a poor school. And they still write the N-word across his mansion in Los Angeles, by the way. You can be Professor Henry Louis Gates Jr., right? Get arrested on your front porch in your own neighborhood by a police officer because he forgot your keys. You could be Jay-Z and send all the water bottles you want to Flint, Michigan. It's never going to actually free us all from the economic position we're in. So the decadent veil is a serious issue. Another thing is, I mentioned the 2053 statistic, and really that's been sped up because of COVID. But there's also the article about $16 trillion lost from the American economy just in the last 20 years due to discrimination against Black Americans. So America will be richer by 16 trillion, not billion, right? $16 trillion in the last 20 years had it not discriminated against Black Americans. Some of the bullet points from that article, and it'd be very clear that article was written by Citigroup, which is a group of white bankers who control over $130 billion in assets, right? So they have no reason to lie, I would argue, unless to start a race war. And so they're saying, stop discriminating against Black people in the housing market, for example. When Black folks buy a house in America, it depreciates in value immediately. Then the whole neighborhood goes down in value, and something called white flight, that is hurting all Americans and lowering the value of America, right? So it's actually a reinvestment reparations. It isn't just a quote unquote handout, or as I like to call it, an inheritance that's been denied. Like I said, it's dire. So the decadent veil speaks to that. The 16 trillion article speaks to that. And really, anyone who looks up, most of us, I think 5% of us make over 350,000 in a year. And all Black businesses combined only make a third of Walmart's revenue in a single year. So there's no bootstrapping ourselves to Jeff Bezos level. It is with the inheritance and cash infusion, and probably with ownership of all these corporations in perpetuity, that we'll see ourselves grow in wealth. And I say give us 3 generations and we'll be on Mars with Elon. If I ever have children, I plan to get them a globe but not a globe of Earth. I have a globe of Earth because I know this pretty well. But I'm talking about one of Mars, which is smaller, which rotates faster, and it has geography. It has Mount Olympus on it. Olympus Mons has regions to it. Has ancient, lake beds. I want my kid to know better than I know that. That's the goal. So that's just a little bit about our wealth position. I want people to understand that it's not necessarily as good as you think it is. It's actually going down. And reparations is kind of like a lifeline. And luckily, we already did the work. So it's an easy argument. Time for them to just pay up in modern day. And it wouldn't come from all Americans. It's a printout from the Federal Reserve. And as I said before, reinvestment, which would lower the federal debt, not raise it, and allow us to compete with China. More made in USA. No more need for cancel culture. Black on black employment would be the new move, right? And black venture capitalists putting their money into businesses to see them thrive would be the future. So that's what I suggest.
Word up, definitely. And yeah, like the narrative, right? Like, it's super important. Narrative is absolute power. Like, and I cannot stress this enough. Narrative is absolute power, because the narrative comes out before like the actions themselves like come out in widespread. And so we have like what's the one movie? Is it Hunger Games? And like literally people are starving and you get picked to compete, and the winners get to eat at the end, if I'm remembering that correctly. Like, but the show, like the show of it all, like the pomp and circumstance around these people, they have like these elaborate like costume like outfits that looks like the Met Gala, like and they're put on pedestals, like, and there's all this like language and whatever like that's around them. But the reality is that they are struggling and we are struggling, and we're all struggling by these people who are putting us in this position to struggle. But we think that like, if only I can get picked. So like there's this idea that I want to get picked for this thing that I'm ultimately sacrificing possibly my life for. That's what's happening. That's what's happening right now, like in our real lives. And so we have like these social media influencers and artists, and it's not to knock them as people at all. It's just like the way that their bodies are being used and commodified, right? Like to make us believe that like this is, the height of luxury. This is what we're all going for. Like this is what success looks like. And it's like, no, like it doesn't even look real. Like that's not even their real lives, like, and why would that be anything that we're trying to get to, especially to like, to your point, like even the Beyoncés and the Jay-Z's, they don't have the influence to shift the tides of anything. Like they cannot do anything outside of their own personal circumstances and maybe a few generations beyond that. You know what I mean? So yeah, like it's a scary thing if you think about it. It's a really, really scary thing if you think about it, especially because it's literally like being led by narrative, like false narrative and propaganda. Wildness. So I want to go back to what you had said. I mean, you said it in good entirety, but I also feel like it's important to kind of lean into. You said that Black folks are estimated to be broke basically by 2053. What can you explain that a little bit more in depth? Why, like, how is that going to happen?
Yeah. The article that says 2053, our wealth is set to be at zero, was first looking at where our wealth position is right now. And for the first time, they were actually able to look at Black Americans versus African and I believe Caribbean immigrants. I might be mixing articles together, but that article says that we're not a part of the tech field. And as automation is the next thing, we'll be left to the wayside for people who have access to higher education in their own homelands, who are being recruited to be the employment force for the next generation here in America. And that's already been proven by the Office of New Americans, which is a government agency that helps people who immigrate to America to get businesses, help them with housing, with English as a second language courses, so on and so forth. I'm sorry. And so saying that to say, I was saying, 2053. Yeah. So us being kept out of the tech field is one thing. Just to look at the $16 trillion study, though, right? It mentions bullet points. Like I mentioned, the housing market. So when we buy a house, compare that to what's called the Great Wealth Transfer. The Great Wealth Transfer, if anyone Googles it, is $68 trillion that white folks are about to pass down to the next generation from their grandparents and parents through housing primarily. That's the wealth, not income, the wealth that they're passing down. And so these houses that have appreciated in value in segregated neighborhoods, while we buy a house, and like I said, it goes down in value. So we're being pillaged for our wealth while they're getting a massive wealth transfer. And so that's what we're looking at. Housing, small business loans, like we've been denied and kept out of. I think we only got 1.1% of them in the last 5 years or something. And we're American. Like, I think a majority of the small business loans should go to us because we don't have capital to invest for our business to thrive. So it mentioned how we don't get loans for our businesses. And because of that, that prevented Black employment, and they were able to quantify that. They mentioned our access to lack of access to higher education. And that's, like I said, because of how affirmative action's worded, and because of legacy admissions, which is white folks, because their parents went to certain colleges, they're able to go to them as well. And disproportionately, this benefits white people because they had segregated colleges where only white folks could go. So, of course, your parents went back when only white parents could go. So we have to deal with that. And so because of that, that has made us lose wealth and go down in wealth, because with a higher education comes more specialized labor and a higher income, which means you can pass down wealth, right? A more access to investment, more risk, more reward. And one more bullet point they mentioned is wage disparity. And so we all know that Black women don't get to pay the same as Black men. They don't get to pay the same as white women, and they don't get paid the same as white men, right? And so they were able to quantify that in the article as well, and they got to like billions of dollars for that too. So we don't get paid the same as Black folks. We don't get bank loans to help our businesses thrive. We don't get access to higher education, and we don't get housing as a way to pass down wealth. All those things, at least from that article, were quantifiable and showed how we've been pillaged for wealth. And one more thing I can mention is there's an author named Sean Rochester, Black man. He wrote the book called The Black Tax. He looked at, let's not talk about slavery, just since slavery ended, how much have Black people been destroyed as far as the Black codes preventing us from voting for people who we wanted in office, the redlining, and what he mentioned in the book, I'm drawing a blank. I can't believe it. Yeah, redlining, what, Jim Crow, a lack of access to the GI Bill, lack of access to Social Security, because they brought out Social Security, but only had it be that you could retire your elderly in certain job positions, ones that we were prevented from, right? And the ones we were relegated to, we couldn't get Social Security for them. And so, and also the race massacres. How can I forget the race massacres? And so we had over 40 cities, just like Black Wall Street, shout out Greenwood, Oklahoma, which were thriving for people who say we need financial literacy, for people who say that, you know what I'm saying, that we don't circulate the dollar or don't understand collective economics. We did even back then at the turn of the century, and we're thriving and successful. And it was, you know, a white woman got touched, let's burn down the whole town, right? Type of things. So that happened to over 40 cities, as well as massacres just in general, police massacres that led up to the Kerner report, or the Kerner Commission, as some of us know, and supposedly the war on poverty, but which did nothing for us, and the New Deal, which did nothing for us. So, yeah, I don't know. It's worse than people can see, because the media doesn't show our wealth position, and because of the model minority myth, which hides just how bad we're doing by importing people, allowing people to immigrate who are at better wealth positions, and allow them space for upward mobility disproportionately. So yeah, it's bad. I have some notes about what we can do with our land and about why Tesla, but I'm open to any other questions as well too.
Yeah, before you get into that, first, like, can you explain what the model minority thing is?
Definitely. So the model minority myth, which is not really a myth, is a tactic, right, of divide and conquer that was used by white folks in order to hide data, and really, let's just say the racist white folks or whatever, to hide data. What they do is they take all the housing from Japanese Americans, tell them take everything you can carry, and you're moving to a concentration camp or whatever, right? That house is given to white folks, really in something called white mediocrity. Those who can't produce are just given free things, which really built the white middle class. Let me be clear, but at the same time they're doing that, they like to say minority as a whole is anything that's not white. And then they say that because Japanese people now have their reparations in 1989, excuse me, let me backstep it. Let me go back a step. Because Japanese people lost their land, right? Because they lost their housing, they import Japanese people, but not all Japanese, only those who have access to wealth, who've already college graduated, who've married into higher economic mobility. And so they let those people come, and they say, look, Japanese, it's not because we're racist, like Japanese people are doing fine in America, albeit the ones who've arrived after the economic harm happened. And so it's disingenuous to make a comparison between the two. But what they do is they compare the two and say, you're both minorities, why can't you? When really, and like I said, say they move someone here who makes $100,000 a year, while Japanese Americans are at the poverty level of 19,000. They say it can't be a racist country if the outcomes are different. It has to be a problem with the individual or a problem with the community, right? And so that's what we've started to learn as far as reparationists, as far as people who study different tactics of white supremacy. And like I said, one of the tactics of white supremacy is divide and conquer. And one of the ways that they do that economically is by comparing two differing peoples and saying that they're the same. It's also called flat blackness, in order to put the blame on the victim, victim blaming, and inspire more PTSD and self-hate amongst Black people specifically, or really whoever the outcast is of that caste system.
Word up. Yeah, and that level of gaslighting, right? It invalidates people's actual experience. Like, it has nothing to do with the systemic terrorism. It has nothing to do with white terrorism or systemic oppression. It has everything to do with your Black ass. Like, it's you. You're the problem. Like, because look at all these other Black and brown folks, like, and they're thriving, but their circumstances are absolutely different, right? And I've been noticing this more so, like, and there's language around it as well. But around like other Black folks from the diaspora that are not ADOS, are not Black Americans, who are also able to like access and benefit from things that we're not able to access and benefit from, like able to go to schools that we don't have access to, able to have stability and family and community that we don't have access to, because there's a constant threat to our existence, right? Like, we're constantly under threat because we're constantly being hunted, like, that, like, physically, but also like economically and otherwise, and it what I've observed, like, and this is empirical data, but like definitely from what I've observed is that there's like this massive, it seems, rift between like us as Black people in the diaspora, right? Like, so like there are folks who are from the continent or otherwise who look at us like we're wild, like, and carry the same rhetoric that white people have about us. Like, and it's, first of all, it's heartbreaking. Like, it's really, really painful to see somebody who looks like you, is from the same place, is talking to you like you ain't shit. Like there ain't nothing about you that's worthy, that you lazy, and the reason why you're in the circumstances is because of you. Not at all like acknowledging or even realizing that like we're able to exist in the same space, but your existence is totally different than mine, right? Like, and not being able to have like a legitimate conversation in that space is like really disheartening, but it's also super, super violent, right? Because there's these Black bodies that are being put on top of our Black bodies, and like, so to your point, it's like, well, they're thriving. Like, what do you mean? Black people are thriving. Black people are graduating university and entering into STEAM and STEM and et cetera, et cetera. But they're like, but they're not Black Americans though. Like, that's a totally different thing. Like, but because that data is like, just all mashed together, like that there's nothing that, and again, it erases us wholly, and it also gaslights the fuck out of us. Like, it just, like, it causes a lot of issues internally.
I often say, and it's hard for people to really argue this point, I feel like, because I've not really gotten pushback on it, but I'm not going to say immigrants X, Y, and Z, but I know that one of the tools of white supremacy and America being a racist country, in my mind, is the immigration system. And one of the things that's interesting is they have something called a civics test, which is 100 questions that you have to study, and there's 25 at random that they give you. You have to pass this test to become an American citizen. I argue that white folks wrote that test in order to make you think that Black folks didn't contribute to American history. And so it's propaganda. And so you have to become misinformed in American history to become an American citizen. Nobody ever argues that point against me. So that's why we have people who are, and not to say that everyone believes the test that they're answering, right? But some do. and some don't ask questions, and they can't anyway. So they come into America being misinformed, and they look at black people not understanding why the white middle class exists, right? Not understanding what the Homestead Act is, right? The 160 acres that they got for free. Not understanding what the New Deal is, how the suburbs was given to them for free, or the GI Bill, how they came back from World War II. We were still in segregated bunkers where we had captured Nazis who were eating at white lunch counters with the same white folks while we could only serve food and sweep inside there, right? But they got the GI Bill, they got land grants, they got help creating business models and government subsidies to help their businesses thrive, right? And I'm gonna mention that in a minute when we get to what we can do with our land. So the white middle class was created by government handouts. Let me just say that straight up, right? And so, but people from outside communities come into America and think either first that they're going to step on top of us themselves, or that we don't try hard enough, we don't apply to enough things. Maybe there's something wrong with a Black American's brain where he can't become a chemist, so all the chemists need to come from India or need to come from Western Africa, as though human beings aren't born with all the same potential, and that Black Americans didn't help bring human beings to the moon. Black women, I'll say specifically, right? So I don't know. To me, it's disingenuous when people try to argue that they didn't know. I do get that the test hides a lot of stuff, and that's why I say that we should focus our energy on being able to actually control immigration policy. But speaking on it at all, people argue xenophobic. I think people coming to America and saying, you know what, I'm just going to help myself, when they see that we are the outcast, and especially when they call themselves black anything, to me, that's xenophobic. They can call themselves Jamaican or Haitian, and shout out the Haitian people, take care of their Haitian people, you know what I'm saying? But Haitian American, they can call themselves Haitian American. But if you say I'm a black person just like you, according to white folks, you know what I'm saying? But I don't know if reparations is, I think that we need more black fathers in the, not knowing about mass incarceration, not understanding what HBCU is, or a historically black college and university. Like that's the issue for me. And especially people who say, you know, I don't know about reparations because X, Y, and Z. Reparations is a stepping stone that we've been arguing since the end of slavery that leads us to actual litigation and actual political power. So government subsidies is one example of that, but having a PAC, having our own political party, we need capital to be able to compete with white folks, because at this point, money is votes, right? And corporations are people, right? And so we can't compete while living in an impoverished state, staying in rental spaces, and not living on land that we govern with tax codes that we can write ourselves. So that's my long walk around it. I was going to mention Jack Daniels, but the civics test is the real main thing. And the civics test misinforms all, I would argue, immigrants and Black Americans' contribution to history. And so they don't know that, and they don't know about the white middle class. And that's what causes the friction I think we see in modern day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've never even thought about like the civics test. Like I know it exists, but I never put together that, like, of course it erases us wholly, right? Like, of course, like we're not mentioned at all, like I'm sure. And if we are, it's definitely not a positive. But even beyond that, like it like now I'm thinking about, and which is typically what I think about as far as like misinformation with, you know, immigrant folks or you know, continental Black folks and us, is that we're also misinformed about each other wholly, right? Like the propaganda that's in our media, like, you know, because like we're just, you know, like make no mistake, we're also misinformed about, you know, our folks across the water, absolutely. But like if, you know, like the thinking about the experience of someone who is continental African, and their exposure to Black people is like the wild representations of Black people in spaghetti westerns and in Disney movies and cartoons and, you know, Looney Tunes and whatever else that makes us look dumb, slow, or monstrous, right? Like, because that is essentially American media, right? In literature. That's what they're getting as well. And then having no exposure to us until they get here. And then again, like on top of that, like the civics test, like kind of like hammering in that, like, yeah, like these folks don't really exist. Like, don't pay them no mind. We already know they're all monsters. Then that makes sense that, like, you know, the misinformation, like, and it's really, really hard to really unify, as folks like to say, and feel like we are as connected as we actually are, like, you know, and drives that wedge between the two of us. Someone, and you had just touched on this a moment ago, but someone actually said reparations alone will not provide Black liberation. Much more will be required. Do you have anything to say on that further?
Yeah, definitely. I mentioned it a bit for a second. Let me step back to the model minority, and then I'm gonna swing back to that. Um, the Jewish community. We often people say we need to be more like them, and I agree that in Brooklyn, where I am right now, they got their own ambulances. They call their own police force before the real police come. Community policing. Why we can't have that? They got people that sell them their clothes, people that got their grocery shops, and they all grocery shop with each other. You know what I'm saying? They all buy from the same hat maker. You can tell. And so I would like to be more like that as far as a community, but I believe that that's possible with the 40 acres claim, or let's say 160 acres, because I'm a Black nationalist and really a separatist, at least for a period of years, so that we can have autonomy and therapy, in our own militia, community policing, as well as our own school system, so that we can have 13 months of Black history. The Jewish community, when we compare ourselves to them, I think we should be careful, because they got paid reparations. And they got paid reparations by Germany in 1945, $845 million in the state of Israel. They got land and direct cash. I want to make that clear. Not saying I'm a Zionist, not saying, shout out Palestine, free Palestine. Now, at the same time, in 1988, they went back to the German government and got 125 million additional dollars, which was lifetime payments for Holocaust survivors. And then in 1999, I just want to be very clear about this, right? Let's slow it down. In American courts, they sued for German industries, German corporations that had not paid them for the labor that they committed. And that was Jewish and non-Jewish people that was in this class action lawsuit. They sued BMW, Siemens Bank, Volkswagen. I make that point because I wanted to move on to why our reparations claim can't just be direct cash payments and land and credit score resets and all these things. Because ultimately, as I mentioned way back at the beginning of this conversation, guarantee of non-repetition is a part of reparative justice. And that's really white folks saying that they're not going to be racist anymore, that they're going to, change the housing market, so on and so forth. And I don't think that's going to happen. I don't believe it's possible, honestly. So I think that we use our initial direct cash payments in order to go after specific industries. Like I like to mention Jack Daniels whiskey, because everybody knows who Jack Daniels is. The white family that owns Jack Daniels, they know that they bought an enslaved man from a nearby plantation named Uncle Nearest. He created the recipe that they still drink to this day. But before that, he taught them how to distill in general. They wouldn't have a business without him. Forget a recipe, right? So I believe his family's owed controlling equity interest in that company in perpetuity until they want to sell their shares. And just to compare that to someone like Kobe Bryant, right? Kobe Bryant, rest in peace. He put up, in my understanding, $6 million to own 10% of Body Armor, which is a drink company, kind of like a Gatorade rival. Beyond the grave, that $6 million is now worth $400 million because they just sold it for billions of dollars. So owning equity is very, very important in a conversation of being partners, in a conversation of true wealth, passing down a percentage ownership of a business versus, getting a paycheck or something like that. So Jack Daniels whiskey. Back on the Jewish people real quick. Obama himself paid reparations, but not to Black people. He actually blocked reparations for Black people for 8 years. He blocked John Conyers from suggesting HR 40 on the House floor and told Ta-Nehisi Coates to his face that reparations would be unfair to immigrants, so he don't know about all that. Although it doesn't even come from taxing anybody in modern day America. If we could tax all of America right now, it wouldn't come close to what our ancestors generated. It has to be printed out by the federal government direct. So no thank you, Obama, but he gave $12 million to Holocaust survivors. So he does support reparations. He is pro reparation, just sometimes, for model minorities. He can say minorities have received reparations, right? And some people say that Obama was our reparations, although he's Kenyan and white, so he's not even a slave descendant. I don't know why he was singing Amazing Grace in front of us. And many of us now say he ain't Black, and I'm glad we're starting to say that. And I wanted to mention Asians. Asians are such the model minority. They're the model of model minorities. They're the model of model minorities. Like, they're actually doing better than white folks in some economic statistics, right? Some of them are actually taking our affirmative action because Asian includes Indian people, and some Indians have claimed that they were Black in order to receive affirmative action. In fact, a famous Indian actress named Mindy Kaling, y'all might know her from The Office, her brother received affirmative action for 4 years. in order to graduate. So I don't consider them somebody who's necessarily doing worse than us disproportionately. Although Asian is a blanket term, it is an umbrella that can include both Cambodians, Filipinos, and Chinese and Japanese, and people from India and so all the in between. Y'all know I love geography, so I get it. So I'll say that. But we have the Asian American Pacific Islander hate crime bill, right? I don't know if they've received the same vitriol as far as hate and been victims to the same violence as us, or even would want to compare. But it's interesting how they're able to get these bills passed without having a Japanese president, a Japanese American president, right? We had to get Obama, right, before we could get our reparations, and then he didn't give us reparations. So what does it take? And I was gonna mention Korean beauty supplies, but I think I'm preaching to the choir, just saying that we've seen how white folks will use proximity. They'll leave us in certain neighborhoods, right, that they redline us into, and they'll put immigrant communities at our proximity in order to take money out of our community that they don't reinvest. And then, first of all, Black women, the first Black millionaire in America, male or female, was Black, but female, and her name was Sarah Breedlove, Madam Sarah Breedlove, Madam C.J. Walker. And that was because of the hair care industry. Black women's hair was supposed to be a certain look to be professional, and they had certain creams to take care of it. It's an insider thing. You have to know about Black hair to take care of Black hair, right? But the that industry is not owned by Black folks at all anymore. And we could criticize our own, but I look at how Korean beauty supplies are able to get cheap products from Korea through family and friends, right? Through alliances that they have based on race, or really based on nationality. And Black women got to pay full price for it. So their businesses have to pay more money per product, and so their margins aren't the same. And like I said, they're at proximity to us economically, and they take from our communities, don't reinvest in them. So I just want to make it clear that reparationists do criticize not just quote unquote Black immigrants from Africa and from the Caribbean, but we also speak about how immigration from Jewish people, Asian communities, and we have a breakdown of that, a disaggregation of that data, a delineation conversation there as well. So I just wanted to make sure that was understood. And so, but you asked me a specific question, though. I'm sorry.
Oh no, you answered all the questions. I was just enjoying the conversation. I did want to say though, like your point about Jewish folks having their own community, right? Like in a very, very real way, like having their own paramedic, own schools, own policing, systems, all of those things. There's been plenty of times where that's been our case, but again, like we're hunted, like in fact, like the paramedic system that we use nationally, right? Like was started in Pittsburgh by some Black folks in Pittsburgh. It was started by Freedom House. And the reason why we had to start it is because like the little, emergency buses or whatever that would come prior to that wouldn't come to us. But the difference between those paramedics, paramedic systems and the one that Freedom House created is that they wouldn't medically treat you. They would just pick you up and get you to the hospital. So like folks, often would not make it to the hospital because they weren't being treated right then and there. So Freedom House, and it was Freedom House, and it was a doctor that trained the guys or whatever, but it was started essentially there because we needed it, and that was what was used locally, for a time. But the city and the county didn't accept it because it was like just those Black folks on the hill until and the story that I'm told is that like some kid was hit by a car or something happened, in some white neighborhood, and Freedom House was deployed and they ultimately saved the kid or whatever. And it was like this big story. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, like this is great. But instead of investing in actually accepting Freedom House and like the value that they brought not only to the city, but like come to be nationally, the county, Allegheny County, where Pittsburgh is situated, canceled their contract. The city of Pittsburgh duplicated the service and told the guys at Freedom House, well, you can come work for us. You'll just have to be trained under us, even though they would have very well been trained by the guys at Freedom House. And now this is a national system that we all use, right? Like, but it was very much started in Pittsburgh. We've had like collectives and cooperative economics. We've engaged not all of the time, right? We've had freedom schools. We've had all of those things. And they're blown up literally. Like if they're not literally wiped off the map, off the face of the earth, like they're defunded, they're disinvested, like they're invalidated, like all of these things that we continue, like it's like we continue to build things up, but it's like sand, right? Because we're building up these houses and then here comes like white terrorism and systemic oppression to come and blow it up if we get too far. So like, all of the things that Jewish folks do have, like I love the way like it's very impressive the way the Jewish community and Jewish existence society exists, because it is very much boom 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 boom. But I also want to recognize that we can very well have our own version of what does this look like for us to be like self-sustaining and advancing, if it wasn't for the fact that we are constantly being attacked. And then not only are we being attacked by systemically by systemic oppression and systemic whiteness, but everyone else is also told not to come to our aid. Everyone else is told that we deserve it, right? So everyone is looking at us like, oh well, that's what y'all get, while we're constantly being under attack. So I just wanted to touch on that, and also shout out to Freedom House. So with that, you have some notes. What's in your notes, Brad?
Oh yeah, so I can speak about the 40 acres claim and what both I have ideas for, as well as other within our community who have spoken to. And then we can speak about government subsidies and how we can actually make this an achievable claim by 2023. All right, so I'll start with the 40 acres part, right? So again, 40 acres and a mule was something promised to us at the end of the Civil War under something called Special Field Order 15 by a general named General Tecumseh Sherman. Essentially, our ancestors were asked, slavery's finished. What is it that y'all want? And we were like, we need land so that we can have autonomy and till the land by our own labor, and we'll produce not only what we need, but enough to spare and to have excess amongst us as far as a community. In modern day, let's just talk about California, right? California has 45 million acres of land free, which is, I don't want to say free, it's owned by the federal government still. If every Black American, which I'll say is 2.9 million Black/African Americans, so let's just make that 2 million as an even number. Each one of us received a 40 acres claim, that would actually be 80 million acres. So they don't got enough for us in California. But if we split up every acre that they have, because I don't know if every Black American is going to go for the 40 acres claim, but if we did, that would be 22.5 acres per person in California, all the land split up. So if we say, look, every Black American gets 22.5, so we know, not everybody's going to sign up for it, but, let's say 50% of y'all do. We end up still getting, a majority of us having land, and we don't necessarily bankrupt the land of California. But with this land, three things. And again, these aren't just my ideas. These are from conversations I've had with millennial reparationists, with people who are going to school right now, Black young people who are talking about being in school for agricultural engineering and stuff. So they say three things. First of all, solar panels. The future is solar. Like, sun hits us every day, all day, you know what I'm saying? On the planet anyways, and especially closer to the equator. Let's just mention California again, for example. There's Death Valley there. People say, hey, white folks gonna give us the worst land. We don't have to live on our land per se. But if you have land in Death Valley, you're going to be hit with so much solar energy that you can send to Las Vegas for a fee, or send to Los Angeles for a fee, right? Now, these solar farms are really easy upkeep, except for the fact that when rainwater hits them, which is why it's good to have it in the desert, when rainwater hits them, they leak lead and cadmium. So that's why you need to grow hemp on your land as well. Everybody's already talking about growing hemp, especially amongst the Black community. It's $1 billion crop. You can create backpacks from it, T-shirts, water bottles, hemp concrete, so on and so forth. But what's interesting about it is solar panels leak lead and cadmium into the soil when they're hit by rainstorms. Hemp actually removes lead and cadmium from soil. So those are two things we should use in tandem. And then there's vertical farms, which is essentially just in the same way there's parking structures. You would create farms like that, an acre on top of an acre on top of an acre, and have fruits and vegetables throughout, and have ones that need less water at the top so that the water trickles down to ones that need more at the bottom. Doing so will be able to yield enough for our communities with something to spare. So we'll be able to achieve what it was that our ancestors argued at the end of the Civil War. So that's solar farms with solar panels, hemp, and vertical farms, which is for fruits and vegetables. One more thing about solar panels, just because I've looked into it for a second, since the 70s or something, since they've made them better and better, they've gotten more flexible. So we should be looking towards the newest ones, and not necessarily using our own money, but credit cards and credit loans to buy these, by the way. But there's also the fact that 70% of solar panels can be recycled. So we can use the materials from broken ones to get new ones, by the way. And I'm pretty sure if you put some black women, black men's hands on that, we can get that number up to 80 or 90% recyclable. And maybe have recycling plants that are black owned if we're disproportionately going to have solar panels on our land. Because a lot of youth are starting to say that they see it. They're like, man, all of us having solar panels powering America. Like, and we came up with a phrase: we would be disproportionately middleman to the sun and the melanin of America for a generation. So that's really what we're looking at for our land as far as fruits and vegetables, hemp, and solar farms. Is there anything you'd like to say about what I've said so far, or can I speak to the Tesla side of it and keep it rocking? There's actually one more thing since I'm thinking about it. Remember how we always mentioned that black communities, that white folks built trains through our communities, built oil pipelines, but originally it was highways, right? These highways that they built through our communities, we shouldn't fall for the same trick bag again. We have the interstate now, but when we get our 40 acres of land, 160 acres, what so have you, we should be thinking about, and I went to the Tesla website, for example, to see this for myself. They use privately owned land to install supercharger stations. And so the next wave will not be necessarily people stopping at gas stations and driving highways over our communities. We're arguing that we should be the ones to own the land, to have the solar panels, and those solar panels be powering those charging stations so that the electric vehicles in America will have to stop on our land, patron our businesses, charge with our charging stations, right? And instead of driving over us and through our neighborhoods, essentially. And so that's something else to keep in mind. Supercharger stations on our land. They're not toxic. It's just batteries that are underground along with solar panels. And if you're not going to build solar panels, this would be a reason to anyway. Because if you don't just want to power your own house and your own vehicle, you can have it as a form of traffic that you bring around you in order to have patrons who will stop and charge their electric vehicle for 2 hours while staying at your automated hotel overnight, or at your restaurant that you own, your black-owned restaurant, or buying memorabilia about, some shit that says 40 acres and a Tesla on it. You know what I'm saying? So that's another thing to keep in mind. Now let me mention the EV tax credit and then true industry and power. This hashtag, which began as a joke, which began as a way to trap Elon Musk, who's trying to go to Mars in his lifetime, who has SpaceX, all this media attention around him, his stock rising up, all these different inventions that are a part of his business, like the Giga Press, essentially this giant machine that can print the whole back and front of a car in 2 separate sittings. You meld the car together. This is the way they build toy cars. And with that, he'll be able to produce 1 million vehicles in a single year, way faster than any other car manufacturer alive today. So we're looking at this and we're looking at him. And I'm like, everybody's saying with our reparations, we're going to spend it overseas. We're going to buy Mercedes-Benz. We're going to get Ferraris and stuff. I was like, how do I tie our reparations claim back to an American business, but at the same time, someone who's got a lot of media attention around him? That's where the 40 acres claim came from, right? But 40 acres in a Tesla claim. But as I had conversations with people like, man, if I could update my mule, I would do X, Y, and Z, right? And from that, we started hearing people say, man, I want mine to be a horse, because with a horse, I can own a horse ranch. And white folks are going to rehab disproportionately, and they come to pet animals. The rehab will pay you $1,400 for a day to just have people come pet a horse. You know what I'm saying? There's also the EV tax credit. This is an example of what 40 acres in a Tesla could look like, or 40 acres in an EV, an electric vehicle, or 40 acres in a Ford F-150 EV, if that's what, it's whatever, so have you. And as I mentioned earlier, MEMS. Let's get to MEMS Motors. So imagine you walk into a Freedmen's Bureau that's been reinstated, and you say you want 40 acres of land, and then you see that you can have a Tesla, a MEMS Motors black-owned electric car company vehicle, or an 18-wheeler that's electric, an automated from Tesla, or a Tesla robot even. And I'll get to that in a second. That's what I see reparations as being, a plethora of options, but all of them being green energy, black-owned versus getting it as fast as possible with mechanized labor that already exists, or through the Giga Press and stuff like that. But the EV tax credit is something that exists now, and really only people who are able to buy an electric vehicle know about it. But essentially, if you walk into any electric car company, the government is walking in there with you. They're willing to pay up to $7,500, $7,000 of any electric vehicle that you buy as your first vehicle. And on the other end, factories that produce electric vehicles, it's only for the first 200,000 that they sell, or the first 200,000 that people apply anyway to that. They can get that 7,000 write-off. Now, if you look at that, just imagine that, but imagine they completely cover the vehicle. And imagine that the government completely covers it because it was already owed to us. And then imagine you could check the box for a Tesla or a MIMS Motors vehicle or a, what so have you. That's essentially the strategy I'm getting towards with the hashtag. Other people are using the hashtag as well. They're using it just in basics for any post that they make. They're using it because there are Black people who actually have a Tesla, and they're like, damn, but I don't got no land. And, so I got my mule, and there's some people like, nah, it should be a tractor. It's got me looking up John Deere and how they're moving towards electric tractors. Anyways, I'm saying all that to say, and maybe that costs $7,500. The government might be able to afford a John Deere for every Black American now. And that would blow up John Deere. So that's where I started stepping back and saying, do I want to enrich Elon Musk for the next generation? I kind of don't care. If at the end of the Civil War, there was a white dude who had all the mules, I still need my 40 acres and a mule, even if it makes that dude the mule man. I don't care. So if he has the robotic mechanized labor, I'm telling him to go out there and put his robots to work for me. I don't care if it makes him rich. He's trying to go to Mars in his lifetime. Let him do that. You know what I'm saying? Maybe he won't be able to go without this justice claim. He needs our help to go to Mars. So he better be on top of this before I say it's 40 acres and a Ford. And the UAW, the United Auto Workers, come back me and get all their Black auto workers a Ford F-150 electric vehicle paid for by the government that they would be building at the same time. Because the government just bailed out Ford and Stellantis and all these others yet again. So the EV tax credit, I can't stress enough, the American government will pay to help you get a first electric vehicle. I'm saying that we need to play those same types of politics, but have it say a free electric vehicle because their ancestors already fought for it at the end of the Civil War as an update to the mule. And the only real reason I can tie it to green energy, tie it to it, is by having this type of hashtag. Another thing, Gavin Newsom in California, and by the way, California accounts for 50% of all electric vehicles in the country right now. They're moving towards, by 2035, if you're driving a gasoline car, they call it ICE vehicle, internal combustion engine, you will be taxed. I don't want Black folks being taxed. I don't want to have us with 40 acres and a Cadillac and we're already about to be having to pay the government in a foreseeable future. And by 2045, not 2035, but by 2045, Gavin Newsom said that all charging stations in California have to be completely clean energy. So that's another reason that we should be at the forefront of having solar panels so that when they convert all these fossil fuel and coal plant charging stations for hybrid and electric vehicles, we'll be the ones they come to and say, can we siphon off some of the energy from the one on your land, So that's something to keep in mind. And that's an income stream. That's something you can pass down to your children's children. People should be able to drive by a huge landmass and be like, damn, that all them acres of solar panels, that must be somebody Black. That must be somebody who was a slave descendant or something like that. That's what I see for our future. And that's, on top of, like I said, the Tesla robot. Let me mention the 18-wheel and the Tesla robot. Some people have said, as far as controlling industry, Black Americans need to control the trucking industry for the next generation. That way, every time Amazon, Whole Foods, which is owned by Amazon, Trader Joe's, anyone moves goods across the country, Party City, what have you, that they need to rent out our trucks, and let's call that the mule. And an 18-wheeler is a huge automated thing, and the Tesla ones are sweet. He's coming out with mega chargers that can charge them faster, and he's trying to revert that to charging regular vehicles as well. So I could see us each having an 18-wheeler and being the trucking generation. In the same way that Native Americans, we say, oh, they're the ones that got the casinos. I don't want no casino. I want something that ties into industry that's got Jeff Bezos about to be a trillionaire in his lifetime. And by the way, Amazon said that they're going to be net zero carbon emissions by 2040. So who are they going to work with in order to make sure that their goods are crossing across the nation? They could buy out a whole fleet of electric vehicles. They could contract people who have electric vehicles. And again, that goes back to, have we been positioned to own the trucking industry for the next generation? Because ain't no more gas vehicles, at least for trucking, are going to be happening soon. And Tesla even has this one thing where they move as a caravan. You can have one truck that's being piloted by a person and two trucks will follow behind it, automated. almost like a giant train or caravan. So that's another thing that so that's going to make it way easier for one person to move loads across the country. And by the way, that's not going to be a job for human beings anymore, because it's completely automated in a minute. So again, I think that we should own it, and we could use the 40 acres and a mule, updating that to 40 acres and an 18-wheeler, 40 acres and a Tesla 18-wheeler in modern day, in order to have that conversation. And then lastly, the Tesla robot. Elon Musk said that he's creating a humanoid robot that can do daily tasks from cooking and cleaning. And I mean, it's not as sophisticated as washing dishes, but they can carry groceries for you, for elderly. They can go up and down staircases. They can deadlift, which is to bend at the knees and to bend over to lift up things, up to like 50 or 60 pounds or something. And they have a screen on their face that allows you to communicate with them. I imagine if I have 40 acres of land, I would want a fleet of 4 of them going out to, first of all, Google, look at it in his face and be like, Google how to grow bamboo. And it's sitting there like, and then you're like, go out and buy the bamboo seeds, just like how they told slaves. Then you take my Tesla and go get the seed from market, charge it to my credit card. I know you can put your face to the screen. You got to slam your face on the screen, and you're going to pay with my credit card. And then come back with all my groceries and stuff. And then the 4 of y'all go out, make sure there's enough space so that it has room to grow. Google the best way to grow it and everything, and grow my bamboo. Make sure you water it and stuff, and then chop it down when you're done, because I'm going to send it to a factory that's automated. It's going to print it as toilet paper, because toilet paper bamboo is more ecologically friendly for septic tanks, and it's better for your body. It's antimicrobial, antibacterial. That's what I want to do. I'm not trying to employ anybody, honestly, maybe my own family, but they're all going to be receiving their reparations check. So at this point, we need to be the ones who are using mechanized labor for the next generation before we get left to the wayside, try to argue hiring Mexicans like how white folks have been doing, or trying to outsource our labor, or trying to go with mass incarcerated labor and paying them cents on the dollar. So I mentioned the EV tax credit, the 18-wheeler concept, so we can control trucking for a generation. I mentioned the solar farm, so we can control solar energy for a generation and power our own vehicles and houses. I mentioned the Tesla bot, so that we who were once the labor force of America could control the labor force for the next generation. I mentioned vertical farms, so that we can have our own fruits and vegetables that we can give to our community. And I mentioned hemp, which can help, first of all, by itself as $1 billion crop, but grow in tandem with solar panels so that you keep your soil clean and uncontaminated. That's 40 acres in a Tesla.
Word up, word up. Thank you so much for sharing all of those things and everything that you have. My last question that's on my mind anyway at the moment is, where is the current reparations movement? Where do you situate yourself within it?
There's people who go out to do protests to bring awareness to reparations. They pass out paperwork, flyers, and stuff. I've done that. So I've done that 5 times. I did that 5 times last year anyway. In Sacramento, at the California State Capitol, in Oakland, California, where I was pretty much raised at, in front of the city hall. In Washington, D.C., one time as a counter protest to the voting rights march, where I literally yelled reparations and had Al Sharpton yelling it, and had Sheila Jackson Lee at the front. They were the ones trying to hold the banner saying voting rights. And as well, I went again where we were in front of the White House, like properly, like 15, 20 of us, reparations, signs, so on and so forth, and just speaking to people who pass by and stuff. But I feel like in the internet age, it's a lot more powerful to be live streaming, to make video essays and to post them online. So, but I can't say which one's more effective, because Malcolm X and them didn't have none of that. You know what I mean? So I don't want to. I think we should just all see where we fit in for this generation. And I know that the revolution won't be televised, but I think it can be shared, and then the revolution will be actualized once people have the information for it. There is so much information, right? At least the Oregon thing, the lifetime payments thing, the comparisons to other people's thing. And so what's the timeline? I want to be very clear. I'm 33 years old myself, and I believe that I will spend my reparations check in my lifetime. I'm already starting to spend it. I'll be very clear. I'm already starting to invest in businesses in my mind. And I can do it with $200, but that's not an investment that's going to yield results in the same way that a real cash infusion would, like $100,000 a year would. And that's a low ball, by the way, and doesn't include land. So timeline. 2022 is the Oregon bill. It says by 2022, December 31st, if you don't have your paperwork in order, you wouldn't receive the claim after that. I have an issue with that, but I like the urgency of it. But people shouldn't have a deadline to get their paperwork together when it was 400 years of us, having our paperwork destroyed and mismanaged. But that's a deadline. California, which I like to mention very often because I grew up there and because it's a state whose economy is comparable not just to other states, but to other countries. Okay. And has 2 million Black Americans, a lot of veterans, and a very disproportionate housing population. They passed a reparations task force bill, AB 3121. And so now they have a 9-member task force that's studying reparations with a deadline of 2023, by the end of 2023. And so, and by the way, they have hearings with space for public testimony. And I was able to call in. And that was the real first time that I said 40 acres and a Tesla on hard record versus just in conversation with friends and reparationists. And articles started to get written about it where they were trying to half make fun of it, but all they could do was quote me because I don't really know what arguments there are against it. And it would boost Tesla stock. It would be, and so it's a win-win conversation. Like at this point, they should be going for 40 acres and a Tesla, not 40 acres and a MIMS, if they want to continue our oppression. And I should keep mentioning MIMS as much as possible, because if people know that there's a Black-owned alternative, I think they'll be willing to enrich that. And that might help him be able to pass it down for the next generation to his kids to make an even better one or something like that. But so that's 2022 for Oregon, 2023 for California's reparations task force. And there's other cities. You mentioned Detroit. There's Evanston, Illinois, just north of Chicago, which is already paying out reparations, as I said before, but it's only $25,000 stipends versus direct cash payments, so you can invest it as you want. And the houses are on average $400,000 there, so you don't even have a down payment at $40,000 with that stipend, unless you're two people. So that's not right. HR 40, which is House Resolution 40, House Bill 40, is in Congress right now. It needs 218 cosigns. What it states is that, and first of all, we had to argue for this, that they only have 18 months once the bill is passed in order to suggest reparations proposals for all of us federally, as far as 38 to 40 million Black Americans. But at first, HR 40 was going to be forever. They was going to study forever and keep getting a salary of, I believe, $170,000 a year. And so we argued shouldn't be no salary, because if you're getting paid, you're going to make it last as long as possible. And then there was no deadline, so we set a deadline, 18 months. That's a year and 9 months. Don't get me lying. I ain't no math surgeon. I'm a historian. But so let's say 2024 for HR 40. And by the way, they have 90 days to put together that task force of 15 people before they begin studying and have that 18 months. So 2022 for Oregon. First of all, Evanston, Rosewood, reparations are happening now in some specific states, some specific cities. And some states, by the way, can close the racial wealth gap. Another argument that we've had a lot as reparationists. How do we make ourselves at least equal to the wealth that white folks pass down through a cash infusion of income? And still, that's not wealth. That's not an asset, right? That appreciates in value. But how do we at least make ourselves equal to them? We do it by having certain cash infusions that raise our income to be equal to their wealth, so that we can be at the same playing field in modern day. Some cities, some states can do that now, but some people argue it ain't reparations until all of us are free, until we're all federally paid, and they start to address these other injustices, institutions that have committed injustices against us, such as Georgetown University, universities, corporations. I mentioned Jack Daniels, but that's the tip of the iceberg. And as I said before, Robert Smith, the billionaire, said that if you're an American company, you wouldn't exist without slavery. So there should just be a set aside 2% of all your profits to go into a fund for Black business, and they'll be, investing in you. If you're one paying the money, we'll know that, and then we'll be, buying Haagen-Dazs. But if you ain't, paying into that fund, it's a bad look. It shows that you're racist. He kind of put the ball in their court to say, I ain't gonna pay 2%, I'll pay 1%, and then show how much of assholes they are, at least for money, right? With something, again, that they couldn't exist without us. But I'm really excited to see where that's gonna go, that 2% solution argument. And that's happening now. So there's no deadline on that. And it could happen tomorrow. And all of a sudden there could be a fund. New York just spent $2.1 million with their mayor, Eric Adams, love him or hate him, who's black, and he's saying that they're going to be studying 50,000 different people, New Yorkers, to see if reparations is a solution. Of course it is. I don't know why we have to ask people that. It's about what type. And we have to be careful because Evanston, Illinois was forced into a survey that kind of had, do you want housing, or do you want education, or do you want healthcare? And they were like, well, the highest answer was housing. So let's go with housing for now. So that's where we are with that. I do see a question from the commenters. There's one about, are there certain companies that are paying into it? First, with Evanston, Illinois, to take it back, Evanston set aside $10 million for marijuana tax sales. So that's an industry that's being used to fund reparations. Some people have criticized, though, because, first of all, we don't own none of them. We don't own them. Second of all, we're mass incarcerated for it. So we were the entrepreneurs that made this industry what it is today. Now there's the green rush, giving them $500 million. But how is it that a black person can buy marijuana, get taxed, and that tax goes towards paying them reparations? That's kind of backwards. We should be tax-free in the marijuana industry is something I just wanted to mention quickly. But if you want to ask who are the white folks that are starting to invest in this and who, how are they going to benefit from it and stuff, y'all should look up the website moremayors.org, M-O-R-E mayors.org, because that's mayors organizing for reparations and equity. All of them support HR 40, which is federal reparations. They said they'll only work with pilot-led, black-led organizations to create pilot-led programs that are a proof of concept of reparations being a reinvestment in the community and in black folks in their respective cities. So in my mind, they're kind of trying to funnel the money back and be a little bit at the table, at least when black folks say we're going to spend the money on X, Y, and Z, because we could take that money and just move out and form new communities. But they're like, can you talk with the Detroit mayor and we'll be a joint people who will make sure that black folks spend it in the right way, because they see it's coming. So it's a foregone. I often make the joke, though, why doesn't Versace, if black folks can go out and buy Versace in mass, why don't they have a campaign for reparations? Why aren't they saying pay those black folks what they owe? I don't think that first of all, we really are buying Versace. I think it's a lot of them giving it to us for free and hoping that we're going to wear it so that other black folks do, and really white folks do, trying to be black. Make that make sense. And then we're going to have a black Versace, and that's what they're really scared of. That's why they're not bringing it up, because there probably is a black Versace who just doesn't have the capital to invest in themselves and has to go to their factories and use their name. Like Michael Kors is a new name for me. I feel like that just came out. You know what I mean? So that's the long walk to say what's the timeline. I'll even say one last thing. I often make this joke, but I'm half serious. With my reparations, I often said, I'm gonna buy a housing complex to house our people. But then I was like, damn, black folks gonna all be getting a check. They wouldn't need my housing. Then I was like, well, maybe I'll house like Chinese people or something. I was like, they got their own people. Then I was like, so what am I gonna buy? And I was like, black folks gonna be living large. We're gonna be venture capitalists. We're gonna be owning banks and stuff. Like, honestly, I'm gonna buy a yacht or something. And then I was like, shit, fuck a yacht. I'm gonna start a yacht company. I'll design yachts for black folks. Elon Musk was not an expert on electric vehicles. He had, $100 million left over from selling PayPal, which was X.com. He spent $70 million on SpaceX and just $20 million on Tesla. And by the way, that $20 million was because he wanted a faster Porsche that was all electric, and they didn't have one at the time. He started speaking to people like, what would it cost me to do this? And they was like, we'd have to build it from the ground up, from scratch. And he was like, all right, if you're going to do that, I'm going to pay you to do that as a salary. You know what I'm saying? And I'm going to own the blueprints and stuff to this car, and I'm going to sell it to rich folks. And once the rich folks buy it for super expensive price, I'm going to sell medium ones that medium people could buy, and then I'm going to sell low cost ones for everyone. That was his business model. So he wasn't smarter than anyone else. So I believe we have Versace's walking around. I believe we have Elon Musk walking around. They just ain't got the cash infusion to say, I want a faster Porsche. So I want to be that yacht company, if there isn't one now, black-owned yacht company. Dope-ass lighting, maybe some type of where the wind hit it, where it blows ashes off. Because I heard Rick Ross saying that there was ashes all over his yacht. And I was like, I never even had a yacht to know what the issues could be, So maybe we need to design something where the wind flows through and it cleans it up, cleans it out of there. I'll keep it wood grain, everything, so that, it ain't carpets that can get stained and stuff like that. I want our black folks to be able to make the joke. We once got sold up the river in Mississippi, but we're coming back down in style. Like, we can tour the Caribbean, go to every island if we want to, hit each island, you know what I'm saying? And then just be out on the water with lights hidden, parties happening. People want to go out there, but that's Negroes, and then they got to go for their reparations claim in their respective countries as well. So I just wanted to drop that in there, that my first yacht is going to be called quadrillion, which is the number we heard for calculating how much we might be owed for reparations, just from 1776 to 1860, 6.2 quadrillion, which is 15 zeros. You know, I probably told you about this before. That will be 151 million per Black American. And so again, with that amount of wealth, that amount of income, I will definitely be able to start companies, own a parking lot, because anybody's got to park a car, right? Electric or what so have you. And own a yacht company and have a yacht named Quadrillion. And my other yacht's going to be named Perpetuity, because there's a mayor, a Black mayor of, I believe it's Minnesota, of Minneapolis, Minnesota, who's been celebrating Juneteenth before it became a federal holiday. Let me be very clear, because he shouted that out. He's saying not only should reparations be lifetime payments, not only should they be multi-generational, which would mean, 3 generations or something like that, children's children, since it was 6 generations of harm at least. He said a word that I'm going to name my next yacht. He said the word perpetuity. So my first yacht's going to be called Quadrillion, and my second yacht's going to be called Perpetuity, as in our reparations lives as long as your last name's your last name. You're receiving a check from a fund that exists forever and constantly has money being paid into it. So not only is reparations happening now, but it's happening very far into the future, as I see it, multi-generationally in perpetuity, and with us touring up and down the Caribbean, living as a Black luxury class of human being on the planet. People ain't gonna follow us around the store thinking we're stealing no more. They're gonna follow us around thinking they got the money, like, I need to sell something to them. They got enough to buy. We're going to look like rich trust fund babies walking around. And by the way, that's going to permeate to help the whole diaspora, because everyone Black looking is going to look like money. Straight up. Not going to look like no criminals no more. We're going to look like money. That's the future.
I want to get some clarity around going back to Robert Smith. What he suggested, is that something that's happening right now, or is that still conceptual?
He sent out the messages to the CEOs already. And he suggested it on Forbes already. Now he's just waiting for their responses. He's waiting for, let's say it was McDonald's that he sent a message to, or Amazon, right? Saying 2% of all your money, Amazon. And let me be very clear about this too. It's not necessarily that he came up with it on his own. I got to shout out Brittany, who's a homie from Clubhouse, who I think was the real genesis for the idea. But let's go back to Andrew Yang, who was running for president. He said, let's tax just Silicon Valley and tax them because they collect our data when we're just searching stuff. When we search Apple cider versus Apple apple juice, you know what I'm saying? And because they look at these track these numbers and stuff, they go to advertisers and say, hey, you need to have your name based around Apple something, because Apple's a popular term. They're giving away, they're making money off of our free information. And so he's like, tax them. And just with 1%, just with a 1% tax, it would be enough for all Americans, rich or poor, all Americans to receive $1,000 a month, right? And in order to be set at the poverty level, essentially, which is $12,000 a year. And so just keeping that in mind as far as scale with just the Silicon Valley, right? Now let's open it up to all the banks of America, to all the institutions, including Jack Daniel's whiskey, to all the universities, including Georgetown University, which sold 272 of our ancestors back in the 1830s. If we look at all of them, that's what Robert Smith is trying to get towards. He's saying corporations, but really everything in America we should own 2% of. And some people criticize it because they say, oh, well, you want to own 2% of the military industrial complex? Now when they start cutting wars, it's going to be bad for us. We ain't going to get as much of a piggy bank. That's a good and bad thing. Either way you cut it, because a smaller military, because they don't want to pay us 2% of a bigger budget, is a good thing, right? And if the military grows, our number grows, and that means our power and our influence over it grows, and our power to argue whether it's a good or bad thing grows. And with the solar panels, I'm telling you, that's going to remove us from oil wars. It's going to argue with the petrodollar. There are Black Americans who say that they want their money to go into Bitcoin and non-centralized currencies, maybe a Black-owned Bitcoin, a melanin coin, a reparations coin or something. And when doing that, it takes away the power from America, because they can't say, oh, inflation means Black folks, reparations is only worth $50,000 instead of the $120 we're giving them. I don't know, man. There's so many different moving parts to the reparations movement, but I just hope people understand that it's not vitriol against anyone with melanin. It's specificity and a very, very intense self-love for those who are owed it, who after 400 years should really be hiring modern immigrants to America instead of competing with them. And I think I'll land there.
Word up. I very much appreciate this time, Cash. Like I appreciate you from the day that I encountered you on Clubhouse. So there's some good stuff that happens there too. So before we cut out, is there anything else that you want to share with anybody, with our folks? Is there a way that you see that folks can get involved with the reparations movement, the new reparations movement?
Yeah, we got the Clubhouse app and fan base where we have rooms about reparations. And really, to me, I try to inspire people about, what are they going to do once they get it, because that's the main contention people have. And I like that because that's assuming it's going to happen. Right. And I already see it as a foregone conclusion. So do a lot of white folks. So do a lot of mayors, people in power. And so do a lot of other countries who've criticized America constantly about its hypocrisy in claiming itself a bastion of democracy, so on and so forth. So, coming into Clubhouse rooms, talking about how you would invest your $123,000 a year. Imagine you were in Oregon, doing research on your state and bringing that to me, to people around us. Because, shout out Shannon, for example. I didn't know Detroit had a reparations claim, so I got to look further into it. Because cities, there's so many cities in America versus states, and there's 50 of them, and versus the entire federal government, institutions. There's a lot to keep up with. And that's all I watch now. I couldn't tell you who's playing in the Super Bowl or in NBA or anything like that, who didn't get the COVID shot yet. I don't care about none of that. All I care about very specifically is, are you going to address this justice claim, right? And I want to really drill this into the head of Black Americans specifically. And people who are bootstrappers or not. Because I am, to a certain extent, when I said that I'm a separationist and someone who practices collective economics, I definitely think that we can take care of ourselves. But at the same time, I want to talk about the house Negro, field Negro. I used to think that reparationists were like the house Negro, standing, looking at the master's house, like, I want to have a house just like master, right? I want to be just as rich as white folks, and then I can continue the oppression. I can pay Africans less for their resources, or I can, steal land from natives still, or I can mass incarcerate people and make money off their injustice. It's so difficult. I'm sorry. I'm thinking about so many different things at once that go into this, man. Could you redirect me what I was saying? I was saying that.
Yes, I was asking if you had any.
Oh, the house Negro, field Negro. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. Let me just keep it simple. The house Negro wants to be at the same wealth as white folks. And the field Negro is the person who works hard, who built their own house, who actually is growing the fruits and vegetables, right? But the truth is actually the opposite. The house Negro is the person who stands at the steps of the house saying, I talk to white folks and I know the mind of them. They ain't never going to give you nothing. They ain't never going to pay that. Why would they do that? You know what I'm saying? Giving us money would take from their children's children, stuff like that. That's the house Negro. The field Negro is the reparationist. It's the person who's done all the work and has the receipts for it. And we're saying we throwing our tools down. We ain't working another day until you pay us for the work we did already. Okay. And so we can have full economic inclusion and be American citizens. Because until then, they can buy out. I forget the direct quote. It was Jesse Jackson, and even Martin Luther King said this. We found ourselves free at the end of slavery, right? With no money. So we were free to go to any college, but without the tuition money to pay for it. Free to live in any neighborhood, but without the mortgage payments to pay for it, right? And so that's why he said we're coming to get our check. Because in truth, we're not really free until we have economic inclusion, so we can have super PACs. And like I said earlier, if we control the trucking industry, control solar panels, we will be bribing politicians and making sure there's government subsidies, just like this EV tax credit, to subsidize our solar farms, to subsidize our 18-wheeler vehicles. And that might trickle down and help other people too, but our entire community would be disproportionately benefited by that. And that's how we would move as a political party. And even if I don't like playing politics, we could literally, instead of voting for the lesser of two evils, shut off the electricity when we have an issue getting shot in the streets, or that there was a lynching that wasn't investigated. Instead of Houston getting blackouts where they got to be on the grid during certain times of the day, they're powering their own houses and vehicles, as I said before, just with the power of the sun. That's the future I want us to get to. So I'm just pushing towards that every day, and nothing else is important. I promise you, because it's been too long holding Artie and another Martin Luther King. Wait is a familiar ring that stings in the ear of every Black American that knows wait has almost always meant never. We're done waiting. It's time for us to stop working and to get paid for the work we already did, so we can reinvest it and actually be true economic citizens that pay people the right price for their labor. Have access to mechanized labor and automated labor, and start undoing climate change. What the fuck? Like with the solar panels that we had. So that's the future I see for us, and really for humanity. Long before we get to Mars, we need to address this. And doing this will help us become a multiplanetary species, is what I argue. Because he ain't got the money to go to Mars without this justice claim. It would be if he. I did the math. If we got a $100,000 Tesla paid for by the government for every Black American, 38 million of us, that's $3 trillion. Now, do I want to give Elon $3 trillion? I hesitate. I really hesitate to do that. You know what I'm saying? That's crazy, yo. But at the same time, if we're gonna go to Mars as human beings, I don't think he got the money right now, and it's going too slow, and he gonna die before he, in his lifetime. So he needs some massive infusion, and America will be giving that to an American business. So I don't know why they would go against that. The only argument would be, can he do it as fast? And he can't until he gets that gigapress. And so that's why I often mention MEMS Motors, because at the same time, we need to be thinking about a Black solution. And imagine it wasn't no 40 acres in a Tesla. It was 40 acres in a MEMS for every Black American. You walk into the dealership and you just sign the paperwork, and the government funds it. That would blow up him and probably make him rival to Tesla Motors, and have us competing Black-owned car company versus Tesla for a generation. Maybe 3 generations. These are the type of ideas I be having, the type of things I be thinking, the type of hopes I see for our people and for the future. So, and it doesn't come without reparations. I can't stress that enough. So be the field Negro with the receipts. Don't be the house Negro saying it can't happen, man, because nothing else is going to work in modern day. I can't stress that enough. I've done the numbers.
Word up. Thank you so much, Kash. And in mentioning, lynchings that go without justice, I want to shout out justice for Peter Spencer. Peter Spencer was a young man. I believe he was. I think he was immigrant. Black man though, continental African or West Indian. Can't remember at this moment. But anyway, young man who was in our area in Pittsburgh, was in Venango County with I believe a coworker of his and the coworker's friends, all of them white. He didn't know anyone besides the one guy that he was over there with, and he was found shot and killed in Venango County, and no one has been arrested in his murder. His family was not informed on what was going on. They got information off the news before the police actually told them anything, and there's been, to my knowledge, there still has been no movement on Peter Spencer's murder. So definitely justice for him. Shout out to Will Anderson from Homewood. Everybody knows Will. Will's been definitely keeping his name alive and keeping this movement alive. So if you don't know about it, definitely look up Justice for Peter Spencer and learn a little bit more and support that family and his fiance, because they're all very much hurting. Yeah. So again, Kash, I very much appreciate you. I'm so glad that we had this conversation, that you made the time and the space. Like, you're such an amazing person and just a wealth of so much knowledge. So I'm always very happy when I see you pop up it's Kash. You got it. Are those the notes? Word up. You're an impressive young man. Actually, you're a little bit older than me, because I just turned 33. So shout out to me too. So I appreciate you, bro. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your Sunday with some peace, and I will see you around for sure.
Peace, love, and reparations.
Word up. And thank you, everybody who's joined us today. Join us again next week for the CS podcast. If y'all have any questions or whatnot, you already know how to hit me up. Definitely check out Kash. Lean into and learn about the reparations movement, and lean into the conversation, and don't be afraid to have the conversation, because some conversations I feel like people get very tense about, because it feels hard, but it's important that we have real substantive conversations, right, around these things, around everything. So definitely lean into it, ask the questions, look up, do the research, and come up with your own opinions on things. What's up, bro?
Yeah. Can I show them one more thing before we go if they want to support?
Of course.
This hoodie I'm wearing is one of a kind, but I've been able to partner with a Black-owned business in order to create a custom backpack for youth, because I'm trying to get the youth involved with knowing that their land is coming. Not necessarily the old folks, like they get it, you know what I'm saying? But the youth forgot about the 40 acres and a mule. I'm trying to update it, give them a chance to write what they want as an update to the mule and have it rocked on their backpack. This is for sale on the Black Energy Shop, which is a Black-owned business. I'm pairing with them right now just to release 3 products. And eventually I'll have my own website where I can feature, because I'll still be working with dancers full time. That's my main profession, is filming street dance professionally. So I'll still be creating creative dance videos and allowing dancers to express themselves and share their art with the world. But at the same time, we have, little mugs and, it's a manifestation mug. Honestly, that's how I feel about it. But honestly, I did this because white folks are super quick when they hear a phrasing or something to jump in front of it. And I'd rather get a cease and desist and get sued and it become a big thing. And then they're like, a man argues 40 acres is owed to them and thinks Tesla should be the one to, I think that's the conversation I was trying to get to. So ultimately, that's what I want for us. That's why I released this backpack, because I'm not forcing anybody to say Tesla. If you want it to be a MEMS, that's you. If you want it to be a mule, a school, a mall, 40 acres, and it just needs to be that you're thinking about your land again and about updating that mule, and I want the youth to be messing with it. I'm looking at nonprofits who might be willing to buy the backpacks in mass too. So a whole classroom of kids can end up with some fly, stylish looking, bag, while at the same time manifesting their unique justice claim.
That's so lit. Is it blackenergyshop.com?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And then once you shop, you'll see it.
That's super lit. That is super, super lit. And I like the relationship you have to have with the backpack, because you have to think about it and you have to write in what's important. That's dope. Like, that is super dope. Word. Thank you, Kash. Thank you for all the things that you are and all the things that you offer in the world, bro. Like, I'm happy that you're here. All right, y'all. So that'll do it for today. Again, thank y'all again for joining us for another episode of CS Podcast. We'll be back next week with our guest for then, which I'll let y'all know when I feel like it. If y'all have any questions for me or want to check in or whatnot, you already know how to get to me. If you want, more information about Kash or about this episode, or if you want to just continue to engage the conversation around reparations, please do reach out whenever. But definitely share. Have the conversation, have all of the conversations, not only with reparations, but generally have all of the conversations, even when it's hard. It's important that we talk about things. Otherwise, we'll end up being misled and misinformed. And that'll be it for today. Peace.